Madam Secretary General, Excellency Mr. Undersecretary General, Your Excellency Mr. Shakut Farid, members of the Secretariat, members of the Board of Directors, advisors, and most importantly, young ambassadors, delegates to NMUN 2013. Good afternoon and welcome to the closing ceremonies of the National Model United Nations. My name is Michael Eaton, and I have the pleasure to serve as Executive Director. On behalf of the board, I would like to thank all of you for your hard work this week and congratulate you on your accomplishments. It also gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker this afternoon, Peter Lonsky-Tiefenthal, the Undersecretary General for Communication and Public Information. The Undersecretary General has been appointed by Ban Ki-moon in August of 2012 and is responsible for the work of the United Nations Department of Public Information. Between 2007 and 2012, Mr. Lonsky-Tiefenthal served as spokesman and head of the Department for Communication and Information of the Austrian Federal Ministry for European and International Affairs. He spent nearly 30 years within the Austrian Foreign Service, including stints in Asia, North America, and the Middle East, with responsibilities ranging from public diplomacy, development cooperation, to press and information. He has held senior leadership positions in which he was responsible for formulating communication strategies, including the extensive use of modern media tools and crisis management techniques. Please join me in welcoming His Excellency, the Undersecretary General for the Department of Public Information.
Good afternoon. Oopsie. Welcome to the General Assembly Hall here at the United Nations headquarters. We are delighted to have all of you here. The Secretary General asked me to send his regards. He very much regrets that he cannot be with you this afternoon, but he loves interaction with young people, and he told me to tell you that the kind of energy that you are showing and the kind of interest that you are bringing to the work of the United Nations has kind of filled the corridors of the UN and was felt by him even all the way up to the 38th floor. So best regards from the Secretary General. We are delighted that you are here and that you've spent this last week here, also because you've shown a keen interest in what the United Nations do, and not so much only that, but also hopefully will be helping us to share the message with the world that the UN is able today to make a difference in people's lives out there, and to show and share with you for a second the kind of work that the UN does. I got a little note before I walked in here on latest statistics. The UN provides food to 90 million people in 75 countries. It vaccinates 58% of world's children, saving 2.5 million children every year. It assists currently over 34 million refugees around the globe, and it tries to keep peace with 120,000 peacekeepers in 16 missions and on 4 continents. And last but not least, it promotes maternal health, saving the lives of about 30 million women a year. I'm mentioning it because I myself only joined the UN about 6 months ago, as Michael mentioned earlier on. And when I walked in for the first time here into the new office, I heard a lot about all the activities around the globe undertaken not just by the UN headquarters here in New York, but by all our missions in basically all the 193 member countries. And in the end, it always comes down to one question: how and to what extent does that work benefit anyone out there? And I think it is our job to explain to the world that what our colleagues are trying to do on a day-to-day basis effectively does make that difference for the better. And we would like to invite you now, after the kind of experience that you had over the last week, to help us to share that kind of message and to take it with you back to your home countries and hopefully talk about it and tell your friends, your families, and others about it. You have a very famous, if you will, companion in your Model UN program. The Secretary General himself is an alumnus of the program, as are many world leaders who are currently holding government positions in many of the member countries. I understand that my colleague at the outset of the seminar shared with you a little bit what DPI, the Department for Public Information, does around the clock. There are 3 main challenges. One, as you know, the United Nations has 6 so-called working or main languages that we try to disseminate our information with. Plus, through our information offices in many member countries, we try to provide information in as many additional languages as possible. We're trying to do it increasingly via social media, but there are many member states who ask us to continue providing information via more traditional media, via radio, via television. The same is true for print and e-book. Some member states ask us to focus on e-books only, and others tell us, well, but back home it's still difficult to make e-books accessible. Why don't you continue providing printed versions? And thank God printing technology has become a little bit less expensive, and therefore it's possible to also provide print-on-demand publications. The theme you've chosen for this week, Change Your World, is extremely timely because it overlaps and coincides with the UN's goal to try and change the world and to make it a better place, and through it improve the lives, particularly of people in need. Like you, about half of the 7 billion people in the world today are under 25 years of age. You are the largest generation of young people ever on this planet. And this is why the United Nations is more than ever committed on working with you to reach governments, to reach businesses, teachers, scholars, activists, and civil society, and try to empower youth in order to make a contribution to your future, since this world, and the world particularly of tomorrow, is more yours than anyone else's. The Secretary General has mentioned in the message, which I think he shared with you in your publication, he said, make your voices heard and drive political and social change. I'll be shortly introducing you a young man who already makes his voice, and through him, your voice, heard. He's here with us today. His name is Ahmed Al-Hendawi. He's the newly appointed Secretary General's Envoy on Youth. He's the first ever Envoy on Youth for the United Nations in the history of the institution. He joined us only about a month ago, but he hit the ground running with many meetings, and particularly with listening to young people around the world. And it is my pleasure to introduce him to you so that he can share some of his visions and thoughts and some of the results of the conversations he already had with young people around the world with you. Before I close, I'd like to thank the organizing committee who made this event possible, together with some of my colleagues and colleagues of the United Nations, because if it weren't for you, these meetings would not be taking place. But the core and at the heart of these meetings are all of you. And I would like to thank you once again that you've come here, that you've joined us, that you've showed yourself interested in the work of the United Nations. You are a force to be reckoned with, and the future of this planet really belongs to you. Take it into your hands. Thank you very, very much.
Well, it's a great pleasure to meet all of you today, and it's another youthful day in the United Nations. as Mr. Undersecretary General mentioned, welcome to the United Nations. And as the Secretary General always say, this is your home. What you are doing is trying to get closer to the United Nations. And I always start with asking myself, why it's called United Nations? It's called United Nations, my understanding, because it's mandated to unite nations, based in human rights, based in democracy, development, peace, and security. This is the basic mandate of this organization, and this is only one world, one planet that we are living in. In this one world, one planet, there is only one organization called United Nations. It's for all of us. The United Nations is not an organization only run by diplomats or experts or people working in the building. They are, of course, here. But this organization is owned by everyone. This is one planet, one organization, and all of you are coming closer to understand how it works. When you think about how the organization works, I think part of what you do is trying to access and to seek better understanding for the United Nations. To understand better this organization means that you will be able to master the rule of the game. If you want to influence change in this world, you need to know exactly how it works, or where you should channel your efforts and energy. You choose the theme of changing the world. And for me, to be honest, it's not about changing the entire world. It's about changing something in our world to make it a better place for us and for the generations to come. Everybody has a role in this. The United Nations now is working to continue meeting the Millennium Development Goals. In April, we'll be flagging 1,000 days left to the MDGs. And all of you have a role to implement the MDGs and to continue meeting the Millennium Development Goals. But there's a very interesting news here, that why we are written or continue our commitment to implement the MDGs. There's something called post-MDGs, post-2015 Development Agenda. This will be the development plan that will rule our world for the next 15 years. All the doors are open now to hear your voices and to join the consultation. The word we want is a campaign that aiming to involve all young people in this consultation. So your voice will be heard and you will be part of setting the rule and the roadmap for the work of development for the next 15 years. But be careful. It's not a wish list to fill. It's not about you coming and tell the United Nations how the world should be in 15 years. It's about you envisaging a role for yourself and your organization to make it the place that you want to live in. You have a responsibility to share your ideas, but you have a responsibility as well to implement them. This organization meant to harmonize these efforts, to bring all member states, civil society, and everyone to discuss. It provides a venue. And my job, my work as the Secretary General Envoy in Youth is exactly that, to help you to access this organization and to better understand it. I'm not worried about you here because you already found an access point to the organization. But you and myself are worried about enlarging our network and reaching out to more young people to make them closer to the United Nations and working close with us. Be close to the United Nations. United Nations is not an organization. It's a vision, it's a mission in life, it's a way to save this world and to go to the future in a more progressive way and setting more progressive agenda and development agenda for the world we want. We should inherit this world and make it more sustainable. To make it more sustainable, we should think today. We are reaching a point where we cannot afford. If we continue to consume in the same way we are consuming today, we will need 3 globes to accommodate our needs. So far, it's only the Earth. So it means that we need to join our forces and work together. Be close to the United Nations. Be close to our work. And I am the Secretary General Envoy in Youth. It's a great title. It's a great mission. And as the Secretary General told me as well, I'm your envoy to the United Nations. And you are all envoys in one way or another to the United Nations and to young people. Change starts always from the small circle of your community. Go back in history and look to all innovators who changed the world. They were concerned mainly about changing something in the world, in their community, in their small societies, and turned to be a big success. Let's think globally, act locally. Let's Join our forces together, stay tuned, connected to the organization. The development agenda of this organization is on for everyone, every young person, every young woman and girl. Stay always close. Your job should start today, actually, after leaving this great gathering, by transmitting these messages to young people, and always finds way to stay connected. Again, it's not about working or filling the seats as representative for your member states or about working in this building. It's about sharing this mission and this vision and this commitment to continue working. Wish you best of luck. Thank you very much.
Please join me again both in acknowledging the inspiring words and example of the Undersecretary General, who actually had to leave to give a briefing to Ban Ki-moon, but equally so, the words and uplifting example of the United Nations Secretary General Special Envoy Ahmed Al-Hanawi. Thank you very much for joining us. At this time, I would also invite our Chief of Staff for the conference, Thera Watson, to ascend to the upper podium while Madam Secretary General, that sounds good, doesn't it? Yeah, the Madam Secretary General takes the seat in the middle. This closing ceremony offers an opportunity to thank those who have made the conference a success, including the Board of Directors, the staff, advisors, and most importantly, you, the delegates. The NCCA Board of Directors is responsible for the long-term educational and financial integrity of the National Model United Nations. We are a nonprofit corporation in the United States and an NGO affiliated with the Department of Public Information of the United Nations. I would like to introduce you to those members of the board who are present. Many others were either here last week or were at the 1 o'clock ceremony. I'll invite the members to please stand as I read their names, and we'll have a round of applause at the end for all members of the board. The President of the Board, Professor Richard Raitano, Professor Pamela Chasek, Steve Holloway, Vice President Richard Murgo, Professor Kevin Grisham, Professor Marketa Zidkova, and Ambassador Joseph Melrose. In addition, if I could invite any members of the NCCA or NMUN advisory boards who are present to please stand, as including the newly elected member, Ronnie Heinze of the University of Erfurt. Please join me in acknowledging the contribution of these individuals. And at this time, I invite Dr. Raitano to the podium for his closing remarks. President Raitano.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the National Collegiate Conference Association, which also sponsors NMUN Washington and this past January sponsored NMUN Latin America in the Galapagos, please accept the board's thanks for a truly memorable week at NMUN New York. Many thanks to you, our delegates, for your very hard work this week, and thanks also to our outstanding volunteer and professional staffs for their dedication, their high standards of excellence, and for their patience. I have been asked to be brief in my concluding comments, and I will be brief. For so many former delegates who have corresponded with me over the years, and I know this is true of other faculty advisors as well, the words the delegates use so often to describe their experiences at NMUN is life-changing. I know this past week you delegates worked very hard. You wrote outstanding resolutions and reports, and very few, if any of you, were passive bystanders in your committees and councils. A former delegate recently wrote and told me, no matter what profession I end up in, I understand that well-practiced teamwork techniques will be imperative. I learned how to communicate effectively with fellow delegates at NMUN. There were strong personalities in the conference room, and trying to work with all these complex dispositions was a real challenge, but I have learned to withhold judgment. My experience at NMUN has also prepared me to be timely and efficient, and it has prepared me to be open and accepting, and to work well with others. Robert F. Kennedy, who was a United States Attorney General, a U.S. Senator, a presidential candidate in 1968, and my political hero, once remarked that few will have the greatness to bend history itself, but each of us can work to change a small portion of events, and in the total of all these acts will be written the history of this generation. He also said on another occasion, all of us might wish at times that we lived in a more tranquil world, but we don't. And if our times are difficult and perplexing, so are they challenging and filled with opportunity. The great South African patriot and hero Nelson Mandela once remarked, "For to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others." Finally, I am reminded of what is so often, and in my judgment, unfairly said to characterize your generation: overparented, unfocused, and lazy. I reject those characterizations because I believe that the overwhelming majority of you want to do the right things with your lives, and you are open to being challenged and to make a difference in the world around you. You took advantage this week, for example, of an opportunity to examine global problems, and you made a good and honest effort to offer realistic and effective solutions. Don't ever forget the lessons you learned and will take away from you or with you from this time and place. These lessons include working hard and together, trying to find common ground, and understanding that although we may have policy, cultural, ethnic, and national differences, we must be united as human beings in common cause on this planet and live our lives, as Nelson Mandela observed, to help create solutions to problems which threaten and affect us all. Finally, I am always reminded of what the great Irish playwright George Bernard Shaw once wrote: "Some men see things and say, as they are, and say, why? I dream things that never were, and say, why not?" To the young women and men in the hall, you dreamed some things this week to make the world a better place. So now go home and in your own way, act on those dreams, and never, never, never give up on yourselves or making governments better, on changing policies, and on your ability to make a difference in your own lives and in the lives of our fellow human beings. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Aitano. As he mentioned, NMUN conferences include not only NMUN New York and our annual conference in Washington, D.C., but two new events this year that were mentioned in the program: NMUN Korea and NMUN Northwest. Last Thursday, at the closing sessions of Week A, Helen Lee of Yonsei University, the Secretary General for NMUN Korea, described the upcoming conference. She could not be here today, but let me use her words to invite you next November to come to NMUN Korea and celebrate the legacy of the United Nations. The conference will feature tours of the demilitarized zone, cultural visits to palaces, connections to the UN offices, including the Global Climate Fund and the modern facilities of the Songdo International City and the Greater Seoul metropolitan area. I invite you to please visit nmun.org for additional information. Samir Kanal, the Secretary General of NMUN Northwest, is able to be here, and we want to invite him to offer you a brief description of that upcoming conference. Join me in welcoming Samir Kanal.
Thank you to Michael Eaton and the entire Board of Directors and Advisory Board of National Model United Nations, to Madame Secretary General Mueller and all of my friends on the staff, and to you, the head delegates, faculty, delegates, and guests here today. On behalf of Northwest Model United Nations, I am pleased to announce this new conference, which combines the strengths of National Model United Nations, held each spring here in New York, with those of Northwest Model United Nations, held each November in Seattle. Together, our organizations invite you to National Model United Nations Northwest, which will be February 14th through 16th, 2014. Our conference will be held in Portland, Oregon, in the heart of the Pacific Northwest, in the shadow of the Cascade Mountains, and just a short drive away from the majestic Oregon coast. The city itself is filled with dozens of unique neighborhoods to explore, a historic waterfront that is home to the conference venue, and a socially conscious population that will welcome you and your teams with open arms. Simply put, there's no place in the world quite like Portland. More information, including registration and financial details, will be posted on the website NMUN.org in the coming weeks. I want to take the opportunity to thank you once again and welcome you next February to Portland, Oregon, the City of Roses, for National Mall United Nations Northwest. Thank you.
As an organization, we are grateful to the staff for helping put together both the logistics and substance of the program in which you have participated. Please allow me to acknowledge from our office staff, Michael Eng, Paul Van Kira, and Judy Eaton, as well as introduce here to the podium the Director General of this year's conference, Nicholas Warino, to give an overview of what has taken place this past week. Nick.
Thank you, Michael, dear advisors, staff members, and guests. Honorable delegates, citizens from around the world are skeptical and uncertain about their futures. The institutions of old are dysfunctional and unable to adapt to the challenges of today. In such an environment, history has taught us that cynicism and distrust are expected and ways of conflict and violence likely. And yet, in the last 5 days, 300 students from around the globe have showed us why hope remains possible. These students used months of research and preparation, along with their wits and tenacity, to work together to build templates of how to solve many of the world's most pressing problems. They have tackled the crisis in Mali, global climate change, human trafficking, and much more. More inspirationally, they have shown us that cooperation can overcome competition. Delegates, you should be proud of what you've done this week. I ask you take this momentum, embrace the future, and help change the world for the better. It is now my honor to welcome the Secretary General of the National Mall United Nations New York Conference, Miriam Mueller.
Dear members of the Board of Directors, the Advisory Board, NMUN volunteer staff, NCCA staff, advisors, delegates, and guests, welcome. It has been a long week, but standing here in the Great Hall of the United Nations and looking into your faces, I can see the spirit of the United Nations. I've seen you debating rigorously, negotiating on your topics and finding compromises on your resolutions and reports. I know you worked hard, and you can be really proud of what you have achieved. These achievements would not have been possible without hard work and little sleep. Not only by you, but also by a great team of outstanding people, the NMUN senior staff. Their leadership throughout this week has been essential to making this conference a success. Please hold your applause until I've reintroduced them all and they are all standing. Our Director General, Nicholas Warino. Nick is the highest-ranking substantive officer of this conference. He has been responsible for background guides, resolutions, training. Over the last year and this week, Nick has worked tirelessly. Thank you for everything you have given to this conference. Chief of Staff, Thera Watson. As Chief of Staff, there's little you're not responsible for. And Thera has always managed to stay on top of everything. Thera, I knew I could always rely on you. You were my safety net. You made my job so much easier. Thank you for this. Assistant Secretary General for External Affairs, Yichung Xiao. Assistant Chief of Staff, Lucas Carreras. Under Secretary General, General Assembly, Daniel Leyva. Undersecretary General, Economic and Social Council, Harald Eisenhower. Undersecretary General for Development, Theo Tiefri. Undersecretary General, Human Rights and Humanitarian Affairs, Sarah Tully. Undersecretary General for Peace and Security, Katharina Weinert. Undersecretary General, Conference Services, Sarah Johnson. Thank you. And now, I want to thank and reintroduce the NMUN volunteer staff. They have been the ones running your committees, editing papers during the night, printing every paper for voting, handling all of your questions, and in short, they have been the heart of this conference. I cannot express how grateful I am and how honored I feel for having had the chance to work with such an amazing team of outstanding people. Every one of them gave so much to this conference, and they are the ones who made this conference possible. The NMUN Volunteer Staff 2013. When I was sitting in my first closing ceremony, I was exhausted and tired, but I was also exhilarated. I had experienced the passion and energy of NMUN, debating, negotiating, and finally reaching compromises, producing and passing resolutions together, knowing that these resolutions were the best compromise and presented our solutions to the topic. As I was sitting here, I knew that I wanted to stay involved. I wanted to go back home and wanted to stay engaged in politics, the United Nations, and the world that surrounds me. Our theme for this conference, Change Your World, reflects that. As I have mentioned in my opening speech, NMUN has changed my life, and I wanted, through NMUN, to affect and change your lives. You might have spoken in front of 400 people or been leading a group of delegates through negotiations, finding compromises in the end. You had to represent positions of countries that might have conflicted with your own beliefs. All these experiences not only have educated you, but are also part of your personal development and growth. You not only learned about the United Nations and your topics or committees, but also about yourself. And this does not end with this conference. Our theme, Change Your World, also wants to inspire you to carry on, to take this conference and your experiences home with you, to change your worlds. My sincere hope is that this week at NMUN opened your eyes to the world around you and for the fact that we all need each other, that we all depend on each other, to work together, to take responsibility for each other and our world. Quoting former Secretary General Kofi Annan, "More than ever before in human history, we share a common destiny. We can master it only if we face it together. And that, my friends, is why we have the United Nations." In the past week, you have shown that you understand the challenge of working together and the energy it takes. And you have experienced the excitement of working jointly for solutions. And speaking from experience, I am sure you'll overcome your exhaustion so you can enjoy the delegate stands tonight and meet with your partners in committees. Simply being yourself and having fun together. This is also part of NMUN, meeting a diverse group of people, working together and becoming friends. I have met some of my closest friends through NMUN, whether it was as a delegate or on staff, and I still cherish our time at NMUN together, and it will always be a part of me. The personal connections that I have made through NMUN will stay with me wherever I go. From this moment on, as NMUN reaches its end for this year, I hand over the challenge to you. It is now in your hands what you do with your education, your experience, your passion and inspiration. Following Mahatma Gandhi, be the change you wish to see in the world. Take NMUN with you and change your worlds. Thank you.
Thank you to Miriam for an outstanding year as Secretary General. Your leadership over many years has contributed significantly to the quality of learning at NMUN. Some of you may have noticed on the inside cover of your program that there was a dedication to Wolfgang Müller, Miriam's father, who passed away shortly after the conference last year. Miriam, I know he is so proud of what you have done. And we're grateful to Frau Müller for joining us from Germany to be here. Please join me again in recognizing the leadership and commitment of Miriam. It has simply been großartig, awesome. And now for the awards. Although NMUN recognizes the potential of awards to foster competition rather than collaboration, they continue to be offered out of respect for the will of the majority of those attending. The Secretariat awards recipients and criteria outlined on nmun.org. We acknowledge, however, that no one can observe every action in committee or truly judge an individual's learning and growth. We believe participation in the conference as its own reward, and as Professor Raitano said, it has changed the lives of many delegates. We urge you all, advisors, delegates, to maintain an appropriate perspective regarding the awards, since the fundamental basis of the simulation is cooperation and collaboration, working together for multilateral diplomacy. There are no winners and certainly no losers in this process. Remaining in character, participating in committee, and the proper use of the rules of procedure are all factors, and an additional explanation is available on the website. We will be recognizing 3 categories of awards: honorable mention, distinguished delegations, and outstanding delegations. Before doing this, however, I would ask that each of you remember how fortunate we are to use this neutral space and use appropriate decorum in your recognition. There should be no flags, no applause until the end, until all categories are mentioned, and we appreciate your help with this. The first group that we would like to acknowledge is those of you who were recognized by your peers by voting in committee as outstanding delegates in committee. Will all of those who received awards in committee yesterday afternoon please stand to be acknowledged by the body? Congratulations, and thank you for your hard work. Also recognized yesterday in committee were those who wrote outstanding position papers for your preparation in advance of the conference. Will those who were announced yesterday for outstanding position papers please rise so we can acknowledge your preparation? Posted earlier today at the Sheraton Hotel and on the website was the list of the recipients of the delegation awards. They are listed in alphabetical order. I will read the awards in each category. At the end of this ceremony, head delegates are invited to come forward and receive the certificates for these recognitions. The first category is the honorable mentions. I would ask that as a school's name is called, it stand in silence and remain standing as additional names have been called. We will give one round of applause at the end. There should be no individual cheering in the interim. Since this closing ceremony is letters L through Z, we'll read in reverse alphabetical order. So the honorable mention delegations: the United States of America, Università degli Studi di Firenze; the United Arab Emirates, Tallahassee Community College; Turkmenistan, the University of Central Florida; Tunisia, Collège Montmorency; Sweden, the University of Regensburg; South Sudan, the University of Bridgeport; Slovakia, Baylor University; Singapore, the American University of Sharjah; St. Kitts and Nevis, Giovanni Campane nel Mondo; the Russian Federation, Benedictine University; Oman, the University of St. Gallen; Norway, the University of Dayton; Montenegro, Eastern Michigan University; Mauritania, Luis Guido Carli; the Maldives, Francis Marion University; Kazakhstan, Chemnitz University of Technology. I may read these faster, many of them were present at the first session. The Islamic Republic of Iran, Augusta State University; Honduras, DHBW Laureate; Guatemala, Bellevue College; Ethiopia, Ohio Northern University; Estonia, Luis Guido Carli; Denmark, Pulaski University and Valdosta State University; the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the University of Colorado Boulder; Congo, Copenhagen Business School; Chile, Western Washington University; Canada, California State University at Fullerton; Bolivia, Cedarville University; Belgium, Monmouth University; Bangladesh, De La Salle College of St. Benilde; and Austria, National University. Please join me in acknowledging the work of these delegations. The next category is the distinguished delegations. Again, if school's name could stand in silence, and we will acknowledge all of them at the end. Tonga, represented by Christian Albrechts Universität zu Kiel. The Syrian Arab Republic, Albert Ludwigs Universität. The University of Sudan, represented by the University of Ottawa. South Africa, Université Laval. Slovenia, the City College of New York. Saudi Arabia, Université du Québec à Montréal. Panama, California State Polytechnic University, Pomona. Oxfam, California State University, Sacramento. Nigeria, the University of California, Riverside. Nicaragua, Dawson College. Mexico, the ESB Business School at Reutlingen University. Luxembourg, Florida Atlantic University, Liechtenstein, the University of California, Santa Barbara, Latvia, the American University of Beirut, the Lao People's Democratic Republic, Université Saint-Louis Bruxelles, Indonesia, Georgia State University, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the University of Texas at Dallas, the Czech Republic, Syracuse University's Maxwell School, Croatia, SUNY Oneonta, China, the Hudson River Group, Brunei Darussalam, Universidade de Estudos de Padova, Brazil, Université du Québec à Montréal, École des Sciences de la Gestion, Botswana, Collège André Grasset, Benin, Euromed Management, the Bahamas, University of Washington, Azerbaijan, the College of Europe, Argentina, Université de Montréal, Angola, the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and Algeria, the Friedrich Alexander Universität Erlangen-Nuremberg. Please join me in acknowledging the work from these delegations. And the final category of outstanding delegations, again, we'll give one round of applause at the end. Vietnam, the University of New Orleans. Uruguay, Florida International University. Turkey, California State University at San Bernardino. Timor-Leste, the University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh. Somalia, Erasmus University, Rotterdam. Sierra Leone, Alma College, and Papua New Guinea, Alma College. Palestine, California State University, San Bernardino. Lebanon, Victor Valley College. Jordan, the American University in Cairo. Japan, Université Libre de Bruxelles. Israel, Rider University. Ireland, Patrick Henry College. Ghana, the University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh. Germany, Austin College. France, Royal Holloway at the University of London. Finland, Georgia Southern University. Eritrea, Georgia State University. Ecuador, the University of Heidelberg. Burkina Faso, Universidad Católica Andrés Bello. And Barbados, Riverside Community College. Again, please join me in acknowledging the work of your peers. And at this time, it's my pleasure to reintroduce the Secretary General to close the conference and again invite you to the dance. Miriam Mueller.
Thank you. Are there any points or motions on the floor? Marshall Island, to what point or motion do you rise? Thank you, Delegate. We have the motion on the floor to adjourn the meeting till next year. Every delegation in favor? Every delegation opposed? Thank you. It is my honor to declare the National Model United Nations New York 2013 for adjourned.
So again, we'd like to invite the head delegates to come forward for the certificates. Please join us tonight at the dance. If we could invite the head delegates to come forward for the certificates.